control statements, like if statements, while statements, do statements, for statements. We haven't already done this, have we? My understanding is that we're completely done with Chapter 3, but not started on Chapter 4. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. All right. Good. We know what an if statement is. We can skip those slides completely, but we're not gonna. But anyways, it's if, and then there's a Boolean condition, right? You don't put the angle braces. That just is kind of like a fill in the blank. That's one logical structure. There's 3 so-called logical structures. If you ever took fundamentals of programming recently, Notepad, right? There are sequential statements. That's one form of logic. There are loops, there are selection, which are if statements. I forget if this thing calls them decisions. Doesn't call them either. So anyways, so selection or decision, and those are if and switch. Those are the 2 selection statements we have. And if you've only taken COBOL, you've never seen switch before. That's a new one. The third one, COBOL. Did I say COBOL? Yeah. Python. Sorry, I had somebody ask if we were teaching COBOL next semester. It's a pretty rare language. Yeah. Anyways, and then the last one is loop. Those are the 3 logical structures. Now, I consider method calls a 4th logical structure, but books don't call it that way. So those are our 3 logical structures, and I'm not going to ask you to spit them out. But what is sequential? Just one statement on top of the other, like we've been doing. Start at the beginning and keep going. Selection or decisions are if statements. Right? If x equals 7, then do something. Then there's another kind of if statement called a switch. And then there's loops. Loops just repeat. While x is less than 10. For x equals 1, x less than 20, it would count, right? 1 to 20, whatever. I'm back on Chapter 3. We're not on Chapter 5. We're not on the Camtasia PowerPoint. We're on Chapter 4. All right. So if looks like this. You have the so-called if header, and then you have a block of code underneath it. And some textbooks say that this code is subordinate to the if statement. I don't recall if this one says that. But anyways, this block of code between the braces is after the if. And you break your code if you put a semicolon there. If you ever have a semicolon on a line above a curly brace, it's going to break the code. Especially if this is a logical keyword, like an if or a while. So, you're not going to want to put a semicolon there, and I guarantee that, unless y'all are already pretty familiar with typing this stuff, somebody's going to make that mistake and get frustrated. Same with that. If you put a semicolon there, it breaks the code. And so while statements look a lot like if statements, except whatever the condition is, once it hits the bottom of the loop, it comes back and checks the condition. And if it's still true, it repeats it, whereas the if statement did not, right? If that was true, then it did whatever was in here, and then it just kept going on its merry way. But while, once it does whatever's in the body and it hits the closing brace, it runs back and it checks the condition again. So usually the condition is some kind of comparison. Is x equal to 3? Is y less than something? Is this dot equals to something else? So we have comparison operators to see if x equals 3. If y not equals 7. Right? Those kind of things. So our comparison operators. Equal, equal, right? Not equal, less than, greater than, less than or equal, greater than or equal. Now I'm going to retype this just a little bit. Opposites. The opposite of equal, equal is not equal. The opposite of less than is greater than or equal to. Now you might have thought that the opposite of less than is greater than, but it's not really, for reasons we'll show. And then the opposite of greater than is less than or equal to. Now, why do I say that the opposite of less than is not greater than? Oh, by the way, that was supposed to be an equal sign. I said equal, but I accidentally typed a hyphen. So if you were following along with me, fix that. Here's why this is the opposite of this. What if we do this? If x less than 7, print high. And then what if we try to do the opposite? If x greater than 7, print parentheses, quote, by, end quote, in parentheses. Now, I'm not putting semicolons or anything. This is not good code, right? It's not going to work if you type it into NetBeans. But these are opposites, right? So if it does this, it's not supposed to do that. If it doesn't do this, it's supposed to do that. But what's the problem? What happens if x exactly equals 7? What is it going to print?
Nothing.
It's going to print nothing. Because x is not less than 7, 7 is not less than 7, 7 is not greater than 7, it doesn't print anything. So for opposites, we have to do that. So to make sure that you hit the so-called boundary value, the boundary case, you got to use greater than or equal if you meant the opposite of less than. Now these are just pretty easy, right? If parentheses x equals 3, parentheses, in parentheses, you know, print a, end quote, in parentheses. If x not equal to 3, print parentheses b. There's no real mystery to that one, right? That's pretty clear. So that double equal takes two equal signs, not one. If you only have one, it's the assignment operator. Like when you give the value 3 to x. Like if we did this. X equals 3, right? That's the assignment operator. This is the equality operator. Equal equals the equality, or the equals operator. If you mess them up, you'll get a syntax error and it just won't run. Then you'll have to fix it. You can chain conditions together with and or. If parentheses x is greater than 0, and now if you've only done Python, you're used to using the word and. In this language, we use ampersands. And x is less than 101, right? That means if x, not of, if x is greater than 0 and x is less than 101. So that's going to force it to be a number between 1 and 100. And honestly, if I was going to write that, I would actually use greater than and equal, because my brain works better like that. So x greater than equal to 1 and x less than or equal to 100. So let's just make a comment that ampersand ampersand means and. Two vertical bars, which is the shift of the backslash, which is the key above the enter key, not the one underneath the question mark. That means or. And then there's one more. Exclamation means not. These are logical operators. And, or, and not. And, or, not. So this code checks to see if the value is between 1 and 100 inclusive. If it's equal to -1, it's not going to go into the body of the loop. If it's greater than 100, it's not going to go into the body of the loop. So you can make more complex code if you have and or. Not. I bet you already know how to use them. I bet you just may not have seen these symbols for them. Maybe you have. I know Shannon has. I know Lindy has. You took C++, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So you can make them even longer if you want. If x is equal to 1, or x equals to 2, or x equals 7 in parentheses, right? We chained a whole bunch of them together. And what if you have this? If a equals 3, and then you put a curly brace there. And then you have if b equals 4 in parentheses, and you put a curly brace there. And then you print hooray. Could you duplicate that logic with a single if statement and an and? Sure you could. If a equals 3 and b equals 4 in parentheses, print hooray. Right? Same thing. So and can replace nested ifs. Now if you have a whole bunch of else's involved here, like you have an else there and you have an else there, you're not going to be able to replace those with ands. But if it's kind of pure and pristine like that, if it's clean like that with only a single else down at the bottom maybe, then sure you could. Now what do I mean by that? What if you did this? If x, and then you had if y, and then you did something, else you did something 2, else you did something 3. Those are 3 choices, so you couldn't just do that with a single and, right? There's no way to duplicate that function out. Well, I won't say there's no way, but not with a simple if x and y, right? Something else, it's not the same. Because what happened to something 2? We'd have to add some logic. We'd have to add another if or something like that. So you can't always replace nested ifs with ands, but often you can. I think I'll delete that. Don't you love it when I make you type 20 lines and then I delete them? I didn't hear too many people typing those, so I think it's okay. So you use an if statement if you need to ask a question in order to determine what to do next. In other words, if the code needs to make a decision. There are 3 forms. There are if else, and if else if. Like this. If A, do thing 1. Right? That's one form. If A, do thing 1, then this is obviously not real code, right? Else, do thing 2. That's the second form. If A, do thing 1, else, you Python users are familiar with using elif. Well, else if, there's no elif in this language. I like else if better actually. I wish Python did it that way. Else if B, do thing 2, and you can then put as many as else ifs as you want. And then if you feel like it, you could throw on a final else if you wanted to. But those are the 3 things you got. You got if, else, and else if. If you tack on a whole bunch of if else ifs, it's called an if cascade. let me show you. Like if A, do thing 1, else if B, do thing 2, else if C, do thing 3, right? Now that's tabbed out, kind of like we were doing Python or something. If we were to not going to tab it out like that, then we could do if A, D1, else if B, do thing 2, else if C, do thing 3. Now if you're familiar with the term cascade, oh fine, don't show me. It's a series of little waterfalls. Right? Burp, 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 burp. Right. So not just one waterfall, but a series of them. It's a cascade. Kind of like this, right? Each time we tabbed over farther. Now we don't normally write it like that. Although we could. There's nothing illegal about it as long as we had it everything formatted correctly and used our braces where we need to. But that's why this is called an if cascade. An if cascade is just a series of if-else-ifs. Don't even remember if this textbook calls it that. An if cascade is a series of if-else-ifs. If you have an if cascade, it's always a good idea to put one final else down at the bottom. You should always put a final else at the bottom, just to handle the none of the above case. Even if you don't think it's necessary, go ahead and put one there anyways and just make it print a message, unexpected state or something. Because even if it doesn't look necessary, there's a high likelihood that at some point somebody will enter some kind of data that'll manage to get to that point. And if you don't have an else there, then nothing will be printed. It's probably about time to actually play with NetBeans and start demonstrating a little bit of this. How come Open Recent Project isn't available? So I can't tell what our last project was.
I think we're on Project J.
Looks that way. H-I. Okay. Lecture J. Remove the package. Alrighty. So let's say that we asked the user for a choice, and they needed to choose either A, B, or C. Pretend the user had to enter either A, B, or C for whatever purposes, right? So int choice, except let's not make it an int, it's going to be a string. So capital S string choice equals quote A, end quote. That's what they typed in. I'm just doing that rather than throwing in a scanner and making us have to answer a question every time we go. So if parentheses choice equals quote A in parentheses, we're going to print, or excuse me, system.out.println parentheses quote 4, right? That's like a 4.0 if you make an A. End quote in parentheses 0. Else, if parentheses choice equals quote B, end quote in parentheses. I accidentally typed system ERR, and that would actually work. That wasn't intentional. I'm going to leave it, and then I'm going to fix it in a minute and let you see the difference. System.out.println. If you make a B, that's a 3.0. End quote in parentheses semicolon. Else if parentheses choice equals quote C, end quote in parentheses. System.out.println parentheses quote 2.0. All right, now notice we did not implement D or F or anything else like that, right? That's okay. The user's supposed to enter A, B, or C, and this is going to handle that. And so, in fact, an A is a 4.0. The next time we ask them for input and they type in a B is a 3. Awesome. Next time they run it, they type in C, that's a 2. The next time they run it, they type in a D. In other words, they gave it input we weren't expecting. Didn't do anything. Bad things might happen. Or maybe we just don't notice that it didn't do anything, right? Until 100 lines later when something crashes. So you should always put a final else. System.out.println error unexpected choice. End quote, in parentheses, semicolon. Now, if they've entered something bad, at least we find out about it. We might even want to print what the choice was. Unexpected choice, space, end quote, plus choice. That way we get to see what they typed in that was wrong. Or they get to see. Because there's all sorts of things that could go wrong. What if they entered lowercase a's? Unexpected choice. Well, that's true. We did not support lowercase a's. Could we fix that? Oh, by the way, didn't I just lecture about using dot equals? Maybe I didn't, but this is a horrible way of doing comparisons. It happened to work, but this is the absolute worst way of doing comparisons of strings. And I'm real sorry I did that. Delete all of these things inside the parentheses, because we're going to have to go back and type them and make them correct. It works fine in C++ and Python, but what we got to do here is make it choice dot equals parentheses, quote, capital A, end quote. And then do the same thing for the other parentheses, choice dot equals B and choice dot equals C. Choice dot equals parentheses, quote, B in parentheses. And choice dot equals parentheses, C in parentheses. That didn't fix anything. It's still going to print unexpected choice. But we're getting a step closer towards a solution. Because maybe you noticed as you typed in dot equals, what else appeared? Dot equals, ignore case. Much better. Now they can type in lowercase letters and it'll work. So I'm going to change all these dot equals to dot equals, ignore case. Dot equals, whoops, helps if I spell it. Dot equals, ignore case. And one more. Dot equals, ignore case. There we go. That's cool. At least that fixes the uppercase, lowercase a problem. Could we have fixed that in another way? Yeah, I'm going to show you and then I'm going to fix it or undo it. Or maybe I'll just show you for D. Let's make it handle D. Right? Because it's still saying unexpected choice for D. Do I need to slow down? Is anybody not caught up to this point yet? Nobody's saying so, but I hear typey types. Okay, else if parentheses choice dot equals parentheses quote uppercase D end quote in parentheses. And what's the symbol for or? The bars, the vertical lines. Or choice dot equals parentheses lowercase d in parentheses. That would work just as well as using ignore case. I would use ignore case. Oh, I didn't make it do anything though. Right, that's why I'm getting an error on this else here. So system.out.println parentheses quote 1.0 end quote in parentheses semicolon. And then we want to support an F, so we better add one more of these for F. Go ahead and add one for F and make it print 0. And do it with equals ignore case, unless you just really like seeing it like that. All right, so lowercase a did in fact print out 4, so that actually worked. If we had something completely unexpected like a Z, it would still tell us that it was an error. So since y'all did F, I guess I may as well too. I'm going to just copy and paste. Copy the C, paste it here, change that to an F, and change that to a 0.0. There we go. So you use if-else if you need to do, well, you use if-else if you've got two choices, right? Do thing A or thing B. Use if-else if you're going to do more than that. So write a complete program that prompts the user to enter a sentence and then prints an error message if the last character is not a period. Well, it'd be real nice if we knew how to get the last character. All right, yeah, we could do that. But one thing we need to know is some stuff about strings. I think we mentioned dot equals, and did we mention substrings yet? No, that's my C# class. We better do something about strings. Since they're expecting us to, and I don't remember the book covering it yet. String name equals, who's our favorite person? Beyonce, end quote, semicolon. Now I'm going to declare a character. CH. If I do this, CH equals name dot get, dot char at, with a capital A, char at, parentheses 0, and then I print that out, it's going to print B, because this is the first position, that's position 0. So system.out.println, parentheses, quote, 0, space, end quote, plus CH. Now we really didn't need to store it in a temporary variable like that. That's kind of needless middle work using a temporary variable. So on the next one, system.out.println, parentheses, quote, 1, space, end quote, plus name.char, capital AT, well, only the A is capitalized, not the T, parentheses 1, in parentheses, semicolon. That makes it easy, right? Because we can just copy and paste that. Two, 3, 4. I know we did dot length though. What other string methods did we do?
I think upper and lower maybe.
Okay.
Uppercase, lowercase.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to do some again. So 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4. So it's going to print out BEY It's going to print out, this is position 0. We always start counting as zeros as computers rather than 1. That's position 0. That's position 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's go to 5, 6, and then 7. Notice the 7 is passing into the string because I said that was 6. So I'm going to just copy those 3, paste them, and change them to 5, 6, and 7. Then I'm going to run it. And it blew up, but how far did it get before it blew up? It printed out BEYONCE, but it blew up trying to print out character 7. Why? There is no character 7. There's characters 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's print out the string and then the length. So after we declare the string, system.out.println, parentheses, quote, heck, let's use %f, printf, I mean. System.out.printf, parentheses, quote, string equals %s. %s is a placeholder, meaning we're going to fill it in with a string, space, length equals %d. %d means a digit, a decimal, a base 10 digit is what it means. \n, so it'll go to the next line, end quote, comma, and let's print out the string, which is name, and let's print out the length, which is name.length, parentheses in parentheses. So we're going to find out that the length of it is 7, which if we eyeball it, that's true. But when we tried to print out character 7, it failed. And the reason why is zero-based indexing. If you start counting from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 crashes because it's actually the 8th character. So we can't get that far. So since that line is an error, I'm going to comment it out. And I'm going to add a comment. Char at parentheses 7 is an error. The string is 7 characters long, and we can only access, or the only positions it has, only access positions 0 through 6. So a more generic way to say that is you can access elements 0 through n-1, where n is the length of the string or array. We could throw the word in or array there if we wanted to. Okay. So if I change this to system.err.println and run it, just shows up as a different color. And also showed up out of order. That's because there are 2 different print streams. OUT is one print string, ERR is another one, and if you print to ERR, then it might get mixed up with the other one. So why would you want to use it? Well, it makes it red. There may be other good reasons. Why use system.err in Java? What is the point of system.err? All right, in other languages like C++, if you use ERR, it means it cannot be redirected to a file. And I'll show you what redirecting is, and then I'm going to stop talking about this stuff. But when you're at a command line, when you run something, any program that produces text like this, like dir, you can do dir, and then you can use a greater than symbol and give it a file name. Excuse me, like t.txt, and it puts it in the file. Then I could notepad t.txt, and there's my contents, everything that I did. That's printing to the standard string. If we had a C program or Java printing to standard.out, then that would work. But if it was printing to standard.err, it would display on the screen anyways. It would not go to t.txt, which is useful, right? Because you may be sending all the output from a program to a file, but you don't want to inspect that file to see if there were any errors or if it had to stop early, if it would print a message right on the screen. And normally you can't print a message right on the screen if all the output's going to a file. But with standard or system.err, you can. All right, I'm going to change that back, and I do recall that somewhere else I had a system.err as well. If you feel like using system.err and see if it looks good, if you like the red output, it's kind of cool, but like we saw, like maybe here for this error message. Good enough, but then when they start appearing out of order, it gets confusing. So feel free to use it or not. Okay, now the reason we started doing that is because we wanted to know how to get the last character of a string, like if we asked them for a sentence. String S is equal to I like ice cream, exclamation mark, end quote, in parentheses. And we want the last character. Well, how do we get the position of that? Well, I said that we can access elements 0 through n-1, where n is the length of the string. So that's position n-1, where n is the length of the string. Now, do we remember how to get the length of the string? If I did this, int last equals, how could I get the length of the string? What did I do up here to get it? I've actually got the line up on the screen now.
S dot length.
Yeah. Right, it's name.length, parentheses, in parentheses, so it's going to be s.length, parentheses, in parentheses. But I might want to make it -1, or I have to remember to check -1 when I use char at. So I'm going to take -1 there. So if it's 20 characters long, the last position is 19. And let's prove it out. Let's print out the last position. System.out.println parentheses quote last character is space end quote plus s dot char at capital A lowercase t parentheses last in parentheses semicolon. That's how we get the last character out. And if we wanted to print an error message because it wasn't a period, we can do that. If it would have been nice if we'd stored it in a character right before, so that we wouldn't have to keep typing that over and over. We could still do that, right? So ch is equal to, or character space ch underscore last equals s dot char capital A lowercase t parentheses last in parentheses semicolon, and then we could just do a simple if statement, right? If ch underscore last equals period, then it's good. system.out.println parentheses quote ends in a period. End quote, end parentheses, semicolon. I'm getting an error there. Oh. Somebody may know. What did I do wrong here? And no, it's not to use dot equals. The problem is that this is a character, not a string. And in this language, in C and C++ and C#, you have to use single quotes if it's a character rather than double quotes. So fix your code if you're typing along. Make that line single quotes. Looks like a very surprised emoticon of some kind. Else, if parentheses ch underscore last equals single quote exclamation mark, end quote, end parentheses, end apostrophe, single quote, system.out.println parentheses quote ends in a question space mark. No, that's not a question mark. Exclamation point. If you ever wonder why it's a question mark and an exclamation point, I don't know. I'm sure there's a good reason. And we have an if cascade going on, so we should put a final dangling else. Else system.out.println parentheses quote ends in something else, or doesn't end in the right punctuation, or error, not a period or exclamation mark. It's kind of what the book is asking for, printing an error if it doesn't end in a period. And in fact, the last character is an exclamation mark. And so it does end in an exclamation point. But if I come up here and I make this a question mark, I'm going to get the error message. There we go. So you can use AND to check to see if something is inside a range, and you can use OR to see if something is outside a range. In English units, imperial units, American units, we're like one of only 3 or 4 countries who actually use Fahrenheit still. Let's do ftemp for temperature in Fahrenheit, for temp F. Int temp F equals like 72 degrees. Or we could ask the user for it, right? If, parentheses, temp F is greater than or equal to 32, ampersand, ampersand, temp F less than or equal to 212, those are the freezing points and boiling points of water. Past this point, the water is being converted all to steam. Past this point, if you give it time, if it's less than 32, it'll become ice. Exactly at 32 is kind of a different question, but let's just run with it. So if it's greater than 32 and less than 212, then we're going to print out a message. Tell you what. Let's make a string called state. String space state, semicolon. And if the temperature is greater than or equal to 32, and less than or equal to 212, we're going to say state equals quote liquid. End quote semicolon. Now we could just do an else for the next thing, but it wouldn't be proving the point, which is how to check outside of a range. So let's add a comment here. Use AND to check within a range. Now we're going to use OR to check outside the range. If, parentheses, temp F is less than 32, or temperature greater than 212 in parentheses, excuse me, temp F, then state equals not liquid, end quote, in parentheses. Wait, why did I say parentheses? End quote, semicolon. And now let's print our message out. System.out.println parentheses, the water is space, end quote, plus state. Right, that way it'll print either liquid or not liquid. It's complaining. It's saying the variable may not have been initialized. That's true. Logically, we know that one or the other is going to happen. But it doesn't know. It doesn't know that we worded our if statements in that way, so we better initialize our variable. So string state equals quote, quote. Or how about we even put something, right? Uninitialized. Something so that we know that we got to an invalid point if we come here and it says the water is uninitialized and we know that it's not a good value. Or that's kind of too fancy. Not said. We're not going to see that message, but if we did, I'd like for it to be good English. Alrighty. And in fact, the water is a liquid because it's 72 degrees. Let's do a little bit more like that. If, parentheses, the temperature is less than 50, in parentheses, excuse me, temp F, state equals, parentheses, cold, exclamation mark, end quote, semicolon. Else if temperature is less than 85, in parentheses, I keep doing that, I should have just made it temp rather than temp F. If temp F less than or greater than less than 85, in parentheses, the state is, quote, nice, end quote. Else if, parentheses, temperature F is less than 100, in parentheses, the state is equal to pretty hot, end quote, semicolon. And our final else, the state is equal to much too hot. I don't know why I ended some things in exclamation marks and some not, so I'm going to go ahead and put exclamation marks on everything, end quote, semicolon. And let's print another message out. System.out.println, parentheses, quote, the weather is, end quote, plus state. So since the weather is set to 72 right now, which of these is it going to print?
Nice and pretty hot, right?
Well, it's not going to print pretty hot because it's 72. It's not less than 50, so it's not going to do that, but it is less than 85. So it's going to print nice. But if we change it, come up here and change it to 92, then in fact the weather is pretty hot. And so on. You know, if we make it 120 degrees, it'll say it's way too hot. Alrighty, homework based on this idea. Then I'll come help with typos or whatever. By the way, this is the end of main. This is the end of the class. Even if I don't remember to do it, I always should. Why? Because when we start adding curly braces and stuff like that, eventually we'll hit the point where they get confusing. Homework, 2 parts. One is very simple, and you could just, I know you've seen this before in this language or other languages, and it may even be an example in the book, but write a program that asks the user to enter a letter grade. No, enter a numeric grade and print either A, B, C, D, or F. Use the standard grade divisions. 90 and above is an A, you know, below 60 is an F. Right, we know that. 80 is a B, 70 is a C, 60 is a D, below 60 is an F. So that's just part one. Part two, ask the user to enter a word. You better store it in a string, and then print the first and last characters, letters of the word using char@. Part three, if the word equals your name, print, hey, that's me. Use dot equals ignore case. So you're just going to have to put your own name in there, right? You're just going to compare against your own name. So for example, if parentheses s dot equals ignore case parentheses quote Robert, right? Something like that. Make sense? All right, let's make a Dropbox and be done.